In his 2013 book, Radical Traditions, Reimagining Culture in Contemporary Balinese Music, Andrew McGraw provides an extended historical and political history surrounding Balinese gamelan music, which laid the foundation for explaining and critiquing the many intercultural music projects in Indonesia in the 20th century through to today. Many such cross-cultural collaborations in the past few decades are providing interesting opportunities for hybridized musical practices to develop, and for musical ideas to pass back and forth between project participants. This links to a broader movement that Michael Tenzer points out in a 2018 article, that there is a growing body of so-called supra-cultural contemporary musics around the world that reach beyond their geo-cultural frontiers and, quote, push human capacities to coordinate in rhythm through complex asymmetrical periodicities that are rare or unknown in source traditions. McGraw's work critiques the power dynamics at play in these projects and brings out their complex political dimensions. However, he does not focus on how the musicians are learning to perform contemporary gamelan music, cross-cultural or not. Likewise, Tenzer's claim does not provide an ethnographic understanding of the strategies used by musicians to perform the rhythmically challenging music he analyzes in his article. To respond to these gaps, I ask the questions: how do Balinese musicians deal with the stretching of their capacity to coordinate in rhythm? And how are musicians changing or adapting learning strategies to embody complex or irregular periodicities? With this in mind, in this presentation, I want to draw your attention to one intercultural composition project, composed by a non-Indonesian but performed by a Balinese gamelan ensemble. And then I'll discuss the arising issues surrounding musicality, performance practice, embodiment, and entrainment. I have more examples, but for the sake of time, I cannot mention them today, sadly. To answer these questions, I analyze the composition's rhythms to understand their complexities and the resultant difficulties they present for a performance. And then, through various ethnographic means, I'll discover what these projects reveal about contemporary Balinese performance practices and how the musicians actually learn to play the challenging rhythms present. If the music I will analyze supposedly stretches the human capacities to coordinate in rhythm, I must first ask, what are they? What are the human capacities to coordinate in rhythm? Well, since the pioneering work of Justin London in his 2004 book Hearing in Time, it has been fairly well established and accepted that the experience of rhythm and meter is a deeply psychological one. And London draws on a wide range of psychological studies to make this case. London's understanding of meter hinges on the idea that Richard Cohn calls deep meter, or the hierarchical arrangement of proportionally related pulses. Humans naturally have the ability to entrain to, synchronize with, and predict regular pulses. And this is an ability that appears to be mostly unique to humans, although some research has found exceptions in the animal kingdom. Many of the psychological tests used to establish our cognitive capacities have found that our ability to entrain to and accurately predict pulses has various temporal constraints. For example, there are upper and lower bounds to the speed of pulses that we can reliably predict. At the lower end, London proposes pulses 200 milliseconds apart as the fastest usable beat, and at the upper end, he states 2 seconds as the lowest. Crucially, these baselines have been established using almost exclusively weird or Western-educated, industrialized, rich and democratic test subjects. And research by Pollack and Clayton critique these bounds with examples from traditional musics, showing that Malian and North Indian musicians are able to entrain to faster and slower pulses respectively. Apart from the ethics of representation as an ongoing problematic in these studies, this subject pool may also need to be critiqued through the work of Walter Ong. In his influential 1982 book Orality and Literacy, Ong provides evidence for the idea that writing restructures consciousness. This leads me to believe that the continued rarity of music notation literacy and the maintenance of orality in Balinese musical practice is a factor in their ability to execute the rhythmic feats that I will explain today, which lie on the fringes of these psychological explanations of meter. Thus, the members of primary oral cultures may not be as similar to the weird test subjects as has been assumed by cognition researchers. So, enter Brian Baumbusch. Based in the California Bay Area, composer Brian Baumbusch founded the Lightbulb Ensemble in 2011. The music Baumbusch wrote for the ensemble was densely polyrhythmic, and he and Bay Area collaborator Wayne Vitale wrote pieces inspired by Balinese musical structures and concepts. Talking with Vitali about it, he said that Baumbusch's music presented rhythmic challenges, and I quote, "Brian's music is multi-metric to the extreme. We rehearsed for months and months. As a performer, it sucks because you have to focus only on your thing, and you can't listen to the other players. You had to stay in your matrix, you don't know how you align with other people, no anchors like downbeats or metric accents, no way to get back on track if you mess up." For his latest piece, recorded in January this year, Baumbusch transported his instruments to Bali and began rehearsals with a group called Nata Swara, comprised of young musicians mostly from Ubud and its surrounding areas. This composition creates several problems for metric analysis and our understanding of entrainment, and it also questions the ability to simultaneously entrain to multiple pulse streams. In the 9th section of his 2021 composition Prisms, Baumbusch composed 12 pokok or core melody tones that form the basis of his melodic structure. However, rather than filling it with groups of 4, 8 or 16 faster pulses, as is conventional in Balinese practice, he filled the space between each of the 12 pokok tones with 90 pulses. Grouping these 90 pulses, he uses a 9/5 polymetric framework that repeats twice for each melody note, making it 45 plus 45. Obscuring this is a movable kajar beat that switches between 3s and 5s and is not always in sync with the 9x5 cycle. Let's have a quick listen. Trying to orient metrically to cycles as long as this will be nearly impossible on a first listen, and the irregularly grouped melody makes it very difficult to predict. But this will give you a sense of the sound world. I'll also draw your attention to the trombone player here and the physical gestures used by the ensemble as they approach the 90 pulse mark, which I'll point out. So to analyze what's going on here, I first prepared this time unit box system notation for the piece's metric scheme to see where everything should line up. The green boxes in the center indicate the trombong's melody using numbers for scale degrees. The blue and orange boxes on either side indicate the streams of 5 pulses and 9 pulses respectively. The X's below the orange here indicate the kajar's part, which usually serves as a steady timekeeper. But as you can see here, it switches between 3s and 5s. Notice as well that the green boxes always align with either a blue or an orange box, showing how this melody has been grafted from this underlying 5/9 framework. Following this, I measured the durations here down to 100th of a millisecond in a digital audio workstation. From these, I was able to deduce that, for example, the time between the 2 melody notes shown here with a red bracket was about 2,200 milliseconds. Now this duration is important. It's past the threshold for metric significance, or for it to be felt as a beat, according to London's research. So let me be specific about what the challenges are here. Well, firstly, the trombone player ideally has to keep in mind both the 9s and the 5s, which are not played by any particular instrument, so that they can accurately place the melody's notes. At the same time, they are hearing a fast kotekan with its own contour, as well as the shifting kajar. The kajar would be useful for placing some attacks, as the irregular groups of 3s and 5s that it plays often line up with either a 5 or a 9. However, as you'll notice on the box graph, at the point where it would be most useful for measuring that especially long duration, the kajar does not align with the trombong's melody notes. I'll play it again, now using the studio recording audio for clarity, so that you can appreciate how tricky this is. So the question on my mind throughout all of this was, how do they do it? So to answer this question and others, I interviewed the composer, the ensemble leader, and the trombone player, and closely observed the interactions that they make in the live performance video. In the following video excerpt, the ensemble leader, Putu Septa, also known as Kuprit, reveals and demonstrates a new learning method where only he uses notation and sings a part to the musicians using a visual up and down of his hand to indicate the beat.
For Moguru Charo, I use notation. Moguru Charo. Baru. New Moguru notasi, not Moguru panggul. Read, speak. They do the da, that. Like that.
So Moguru Bicharo here means learning by speaking, and he proudly boasts this term, as I believe he might actually be the first to coin it. This visual teaching method closely ties the melody to the Qajar beat player's physical up and down gesture. In the next excerpt, he emphasizes the centrality of the Qajar to their performance of the piece and points out a holistic conceptualization of the relationship between the Qajar and the rest of the ensemble's parts. In the live performance, revealingly, the trompong player is constantly staring in the direction of the Qajar, and by the way, on the left is the trompong player.
Qajar is very important for we. If not Qajar, we cannot. Stop Qajar because like that.
Okay.
We know the relationship for the Qajar with the gangster, with the melody, kenang. Qajar is very important. Very difficult for remembering is the before Qajar, next pattern, same motif, but after Qajar.
Finally, if all these explanations weren't enough, Kuprit and Otok reveal a surprising trump card.
Otok make the different feeling. Qajar is 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and then 7. Otok is 4. The feeling is the 4.
The Qajar.
He make feeling 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, yeah.
So you're feeling 4 even when the Qajar is doing something different.
Yeah. I'm feeling 4.
Oh. It turns out that rather than feeling the two streams of 9 and 5 on top of the Qajar, Otok divides the Qajar beat into 4 at all times, even when it changes rate between 3 or 5 pulses in this case, or even in 7 pulses in other parts of the piece. This strategy removes the need to attend to multiple pulse streams entirely. It reverts to a divisional strategy, suggesting a whole new kind of polyrhythmicity to the piece. Then, all that is needed is to practice the sudden changing of speeds, which is something that other kinds of Balinese music does often, and so would prepare him well for this. My multimodal analysis here reveals intriguing nuances of the Balinese conception of meter and rhythm, explains how they bypass a supposedly impossible rhythm, and demonstrates innovative performance practices that are being developed through cross-cultural interactions such as this one. Thank you for listening.